Good afternoon, sir. We're here in front to report our article entitled Plant Development, Primary and Secondary Growth. Indeterminate plant growth meristems. Animals exhibits determinate growth. They grow to a specific body size and shape and then stop growing. But plants exhibit indeterminate growth. They will continue adding new organs as long as they have access to the necessary resources. Plants are able to continue growing indefinitely like this due to specialized tissues called meristems, which are regions of continuous cell division and growth. Meristematic tissue cells are essentially stem cells. They are undifferentiated and they continue to produce cells that quickly differentiate or specialize and become permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues consist of three types based on their location in the plant. Apical meristems contain meristematic tissue located at the tips of stems and roots which enable a plant to extend in length. Lateral meristems facilitate growth in the thickness of width in a maturing plant. Lateral meristems can also be called cambia. Intercalary meristems occur only in some monocots at the bases of leaf blades and at nodes. This tissues enables the monocot leaf blade to increase in length from the leaf base. For example, it allows long grass leaves to elongate even after repeated grazing or mowing. Meristems contribute to both primary and secondary growth. Primary growth is controlled by root apical meristems or shoot apical meristems. Secondary growth is controlled by the two lateral meristems called the vascular cambium and the core cambium. Not all plants exhibit secondary growth.
Primary growth in roots. Root growth begins with the seed germination. When the plant embryo emerges from the seed, the radicle of the embryo forms the root system. The tip of the root is protected by the root cap, a structure exclusive to roots and unlike any other plant structure. The root cap is continuously replaced because it is quickly damaged by the soil as the root pushes through soil. Behind the root cap, within the first centimeter or so, the root tip can be divided into three zones. The zone of cellular division is the location where the new cells are being generated by mitotic cell division. This process is driven by the activity of the apical meristem located immediately behind or under the root cap. The zone of cellular elongation is the location where the new cells are growing or increasing in length. To add length to the root, this process requires uptake of water, which literally stretches the cells and increases their size. The zone of cellular maturation is the location where newly elongated cells complete their differentiation into the dermal, muscular, or gland tissues. Maturation is driven by changes in gene expression.
In another form of primary growth, some plants also have lateral roots that branch from a main taproot. The lateral roots originate from meristematic tissue in the pericycle, which is a layer of parenchyma cells that surrounds vascular cylinder in the center of the root. Once they have emerged, the lateral roots then display their own primary growth by continually adding length to the lateral root.
Primary growth in shoots. Just as in roots, primary growth in stems is a result of rapidly dividing cells in the apical meristems at the shoot tip. Subsequent cell elongation that leads to primary growth. One difference is that there is no need for a structure like a root cap, because the system does not have to force its way into the soil. Most primary growth for many plants occurs primarily in the apical bud instead of the axillary buds. This phenomenon is called apical dominance, where the apical buds prevents the growth of axillary buds that form along the sides of branches and stems. Most coniferous trees exhibit strong apical dominance, thus producing the typical conical Christmas tree shape. If the apical bud is removed, Then the auxiliary buds will start forming lateral branches. Gardeners take advantage of this process when it prune plants by cutting off the tops of branches, encouraging the auxiliary buds to grow out and give the plant a bushy shape.
Secondary growth in shoots and roots. The process of secondary growth is controlled by the lateral meristems in both stems and roots. Lateral meristems include the vascular cambium, and in woody plants, the cork cambium. Herbaceous plants mostly undergo primary growth, with very little secondary growth. Secondary growth or wood is noticeable in woody plants. It occurs in some dicots, but occurs very rarely in monocots. The combined actions of the vascular and cork cambia together results in secondary growth, with the activity of the vascular cambium contributing most of the girth of the stem. Components of woody stems and contributions to annual tree rings. A new layer of xylem and pole are added by the vascular cambium each year during the growing season, creating new wood and new bark each year. Wood is composed of xylem. Wood is composed of xylem and pith, the ground tissue found within the center of a woody stem. Wood is everything from the vascular cambium toward the interior of the woody stem. Bark is composed of foam and cork. Bark is everything from the vascular cambium toward the exterior of the woody stem. Over time, the wood gets larger in diameter while the bark largely remains the same depth. Why is this case? As the tree grows, it adds a new layer of xylem every year toward the inside of the ring of vascular cambium as the tree becomes wider and wider. The interior xylem layers eventually fill with resin and become non-functional for carrying water, but they provide critical structural support as the tree becomes wider. This interior non-functional xylem is called heartwood. The newer functional xylem is called sapwood. A newly layered foam is added each year toward the exterior of the ring of vascular cambium. The core cambium located outside of the vascular cambium is also adding new layers of cork. The exterior mass layer of foam become crushed against the core cambium and are broken down within the bark. Thus, a mature tree contains many interior layers of older non-functional xylem deep within the stem, but only a small amount of older foam. The activity of the vascular cambium results in annual growth rings. During the spring growing season, cells of the secondary xylem have a large internal diameter and their primary cell walls are relatively thin. This is known as early wood or spring wood. During the fall season, the secondary xylem develops thick cell walls, forming late wood or autumn wood, which is denser than early wood. This alternation of early and late wood is due largely to a seasonal decrease in the number of B cell elements and a seasonal increase in the number of chalcids. It results in the formation of an annual ring, which can be seen as circular ring in the cross section of the stem. An examine of the number of annual rings under nature, such as their size and cell wall thickness, can reveal the age of the tree and prevailing climatic condition during its season. Plants grow into two directions. Primary growth is growth taller, secondary growth is growth wider. But regardless of the type of growth, we need something known as a meristem. Meristem tissue is associated with the terminal bud that we called before apical bud of our plant and our axillary buds that are places where we have a lot of growth. And the cell type primarily is this location would be parenchyme cells. Why? Remember, parenchyme cells are associated with high levels of metabolisms. They're going to be required for growth, When I say secondary growth is wider, don't think about these production leaves sticking out to the side of the plants of being wider. Now, when we look at this plant root, the zone of differentiation is actually closest to the stem of the plant and is what we called final in its figure. So the mean by that is when we look at of cell is the differentiation of the cell types. The process of secondary growth is controlled by a lateral meristem in both stem and roots. Lateral meristem include the vascular cambium and in woody plants, the crook cambium. Cambium is another term for meristem.
Ang vascular cambium mao'y responsable sa pagdugang sa diametro sa mga punuan ug mga gamot ug sa pagporma sa kahoy nga tissue. Ang core cambium mao ang lateral meristem nga responsable sa sekundaryang pagtubo nga nagpuli sa epidermis sa mga gamot ug mga punuan. And lastly, this is the wood growth and structure.